Loree McBride, deep state leader and genocidal social justice warrior terrorist. Though I, Gail Chord Schuler, do not own a gun and am not interested in owning a gun, I still feel the Second Amendment is important because Loree McBride wants to ensure that only she and her deep state have the guns, so that her victims can offer no resistance to her when she reigns. Loree McBride is a clone prototype first created in 1992 in a secret Roman Catholic Jesuit cloning lab designed by bioengineer Brannon Braga, a head Jesuit agent carefully assigned as a producer and screenwriter working for Star Trek The Next Generation at the time. Jesuits can create a clone in a lab and grow them to adulthood in days or months using accelerated growth hormones. Memories from one human being to another can easily be transferred. Jesuits create these clone women, Loree McBride, Camilla Alves, to compete with Gail, in order to destroy Gail's relationships with influential men who love Gail. Clones can be an entirely new creation, a human who's never existed before, or a clone of an actual living human being. Brannon was the first to inform the Jesuits of a possible romance sparking between Brent Spiner and Gail Chord Schuler. Brannon took action to break them up at every opportunity, as well as smearing and belittling Gail by writing in characters for the shows that were similar to Gail, only with terrible qualities. Loree is best known as the wife of Brent Spiner and the mother of his son, Jackson Spiner, when she impregnated herself with Brent's sperm via artificial insemination in 2001, which is a lie she's promoted through extortion on Brent Spiner using Jesuit bigwigs at Paramount Studios, where Brent worked as the actor who portrayed Data in 1992, and being a member of the Jesuit order who've controlled fake news or mainstream media for decades now. Jesuits probably invented the internet, which explains why you can't trust what you read on the internet. Loree's early life. Following Jesuit instructions, Loree orchestrated a conspiracy against Brent Spiner's love for Gail starting in 1992. In September 1992, Jesuit bigwigs at Paramount worked with Loree to allow her entrance to Paramount Studios while Brent was filming for the Star Trek The Next Generation episode A Fistful of Datas. Loree obtained entrance into Paramount Studios faking as a cook, allowing her to bring in knives and her brain control drugs, which she used to spike Brent's beer in the green room, which caused Brent to feel he was making love to Gail while actually making love to Loree. Loree took pictures of her rape, which made Brent appear to have consensual sex with Loree due to the brain control drugs. Loree used her evidence of her rape of Brent as proof she had a relationship with Brent, so that when Brent went to Paramount to object about her, Paramount took her side, ordering Brent to treat Loree like a girlfriend or be exposed publicly as Loree's rapist and be fired, though Brent never wanted Loree and wanted Gail. Loree raped Brent over and over in September 1992, even managing to put in brain control drugs into the water fountain when Brent began bringing his food from home to avoid her drugs. Her rape of him lasted for 3 weeks until LeVar Burton managed to kill her after she tied up Brent inside of Paramount Studios. After LeVar killed her, Brent was relieved, believing he'd gotten rid of her, not knowing she was a clone prototype that could be recreated again in a cloning lab. Loree's rape of Brent made him suicidal when he previously had excellent mental health. Only his love for Gail helped him stay sane in September 1992. Brent knew if he killed himself, it would devastate the woman he truly loved, Gail Chord Schuler. Loree's criminal career. 1992 to 1996, Brent Spiner stalker. Around the end of November 1992, Jesuits reinserted Loree clone number 2 into Brent's life as his stalker. She just showed up around Brent in parking lots where he parked his car and just followed him home and pretended like they were boyfriend-girlfriend. This became a regular ritual with her, where she did things like draw penises in lipstick on the outside walls of Brent's home to torment him and remind him that she had no plans to go away. Loree at first paraded in public as Brent Spiner's publicist 1992 to about 1999, which was a position assigned to her by Paramount Studios to make her believable as Brent's love interest. Apparently, the Jesuits relied on the public's ignorance about the real Brent Spiner to pull this off, because at this time he was reluctant to attend Star Trek conventions, being a very private man who was not comfortable with his newfound fame as the famous Data of Star Trek: The Next Generation. Her stalking became so intense and her intrusion into Brent's life so complete, Brent was unable to keep her out of his house. Brent did not realize that Jesuits had Star Trek-like transporter technology, enabling Loree to materialize herself into Brent's home, regardless of whether she had the key to his house. Brent just resigned himself to her and played her game to protect Gail, because Loree threatened to kill Gail if Brent told Gail about Loree. However, Loree slept in a different room, and Brent locked his bedroom door at night and always checked his closets and behind doors, even wearing football helmets in his home, because Loree loved to whack him over the head with fry pans to knock him out and try to have sex with him through force, because Brent ran away from her if he saw her. Brent even had a camera in his room to film himself while asleep to see if she came into his room and did something to him while he was asleep. Loree lived in Brent's house permanently after June 26, 1996, when Gail learned about her by reading the Houston Chronicle, where Brent's mother Sylvia stated in a Society column that Brent staged a lavish birthday party for his girlfriend Loree McBride at Spago's in Los Angeles. Actually, Brent was not invited to the party, and Loree impersonated Brent's mother and wrote the story as his mother and submitted it to the Houston Chronicle. Brent was very upset about the birthday party because Loree used one of Brent's credit cards, which she stole, to pay for the lavish party. Gail cried for a month upon reading this. It made no sense to her because Brent had called her on the phone and made love to her from 1991 to 1993, and because Brent had made his music album Old Yellow Eyes Is Back for Gail in 1991. Now that Gail knew about Loree jumped up and down on her bed and stayed up all night having a party. Gail abandoned Brent as her long-distance lover after learning about Loree, very confused about Brent, and replaced Brent with Franco Nero as her long-distance lover. Loree upped her game now and went for the kill, making more public appearances and plastering the internet with photoshopped pictures of herself with Brent Spiner at public events. Some fans commented that Loree seemed to live at shopping malls, buying tons of clothing, and that she loved being in the bright lights with Brent. This turned off his more thoughtful fans. 1996 to 1999, Brent Spiner's fake girlfriend. Even though Gail dropped Brent as a love interest, Gail allowed Brent to keep his wiretap on her phone and kept him as a friend, feeling he still deserved that. This irritated Loree, who wanted to remove Gail completely from Brent's life. So Loree attacked Gail's mobile home and used a look-alike of Gail's son to try and burn down Gail's mobile home in Charleston, South Carolina on December 25, 1998, while Gail and her real son ran from front door to back door, desperately putting out fires that were set by the doors. Loree did this on purpose so she could accuse Gail's son of starting the fires, because they were all by the doors. Actually, Gail was in crutches when the fires were set, and if not for her son, could have been burned down in her home. After 3 hours, the police finally showed up, and Gail learned Loree had bought off the Berkeley County Sheriff's Department, like Loree did the Southern California police whenever Brent called to try and report Loree. The police told Gail it was her job to fend off whoever set her fires, and instructed Gail to stay up all night and try to catch them. The Jesuits and Loree were poisoning Gail's food, prescription meds, and whatever they could get away with, and laced her brand new mobile home with extra formaldehyde, which made Gail dizzy and caused her to trip and hurt herself, requiring 9 stitches. Around 1998, when Gail's psychiatrist Peter Naylor, replaced with a Jesuit clone, turned on her wanting to put Gail on dangerous medications that would destroy Gail, Gail weaned herself off all psychiatric meds and tried to not take anything unless she really had to, realizing that just about everything she ingested Jesuits would poison. Gail had the theogenetic profile of King David, Catherine the Great, and Jesuits were not happy that celebrity men like Brent Spiner and Franco Nero loved her. Unbeknownst to Brent and Gail at this time, Jesuits had targeted Gail from birth, 1957, due to the fact that her great-uncle was Howard Hughes, and she had the dreaded genetic profile of 50% King David, 60% Catherine the Great. Because Brent was in love with Gail, Jesuits assigned Loree to Brent to destroy his love for Gail. Loree failed at killing Brent's love for Gail, but she did succeed in getting the reputation of being his love interest, which was a lie promoted by Paramount and the Jesuits, who were both working together to destroy Brent's love for Gail at this time. 1999 to 2001, terrorist and murderer. Jesus spoke to Gail in a still small voice to her mind, December 1999, telling Gail, "Your enemy is the Roman Catholic Church. Loree McBride is a Vatican agent." Gail cried for 3 hours on the phone to Brent and reinstated him as her lover. And married Gail told Brent she wanted to marry him and would divorce her Jesuit husband because Gail realized that Brent only had Loree to protect Gail, that Loree somehow extorted herself onto Brent. This infuriated Loree, but despite this, Brent was able to kick Loree out of his house at this time and convinced Paramount that he should not be obligated to appear with Loree at Star Trek conventions because he was fighting her in court to protect Gail after Loree tried to burn down Gail's mobile home, and for all her harassment against Gail. Paramount released him from his contract, which had ordered him to appear with Loree in public as his girlfriend. Loree and the Jesuits made Gail's divorce from her husband a very expensive, drawn-out divorce. Gail's husband, who was replaced with his clone around 1990 to 1992, using the gradual bit-by-bit method, became treacherous during the divorce and managed to get a Jesuit lawyer and a Jesuit judge to oversee the divorce. Gail, not up on all the Jesuit technology and their methodology, mailed a statement she wrote about her life to her lawyer, which got switched out with a Jesuit version that made her appear crazy. As a result of this, she lost her case to get custody of her son. Besides, the judge was a Jesuit too. Brent was fighting Loree throughout Gail's divorce, and all paperwork related to Gail's divorce also made it to Brent's attorney, who was fighting Loree in court. Brent was suing Loree for damages and trying to get her locked up so he could be free to marry Gail. But Jesuits were relentless. For instance, Gail took an IQ test during the trial as part of her psychological evaluation for fitness to be a mother. She scored genius IQ, but Jesuits switched out Gail's test with a fake one and submitted a fake test to the courts that made Gail appear crazy. Brent tried many times to get money to Gail, but Loree always blocked it. Loree's specialty seems to be using crooked lawyers and twisting the law to pervert justice. Cairo News in Seattle tried to set things up for Gail to win $1 million in a contest, which was a way Brent wanted to help out Gail after her divorce because Gail never worked during her marriage. But Loree brought a lawsuit against Cairo claiming they were in a conspiracy against her and stopped Gail from getting the money. Gail got financial help from her mother to pay for the divorce, and in the end, the judge decided that Gail's Jesuit pedophile husband would get custody of Gail's son, and that for this reason, Gail would need to pay child support in a couple years, the judge assuming that though Gail was crazy and not qualified for custody, she was sane enough to hold down a job if she took her meds. But Gail refused to take psych meds at this time because she feared the meds would destroy her health. Gail had already been sickened many times with prescription meds that destroyed her health. After Gail's divorce in May 2001, Brent tried to be with her, but Loree threatened to kill Gail if he got near her. With nowhere to go and no job, Gail ended up moving to Florida in May 2001 to live with her mother in Florida. Brent, at this time, made plans to move out to Florida, even buying a home in Daytona Beach in the summer of 2001. Brent tried to fly out to Florida to get his love, Gail, and marry her. But Loree McBride blew up a car and laughed and told Brent that she had just blown up Gail. Brent cried. Then Loree said that she just blew up one of her clones. The Loree that blew up may have been Loree clone number 2. So from about 2001 onwards, Brent was dealing with Loree clone number 3. Gail put her stuff in storage in Seattle and could not afford to move it to Florida. Finally, on September 11, 2001, Brent was about to board his jet to go to Florida at the LAX airport. And the news blasted that the 9/11/2001 attacks had happened. Brent canceled his flight. Jesuits planned to crash Brent's jet if he flew out to Florida, like they would kill Robin Williams in 2014 when Robin made serious plans to fly to Florida to marry Gail. During this time, Loree plastered the internet with fake photos of her with Brent. All photos are photoshopped lies with Loree's hard eyes softened in most of the photos. Brent had some fun with some of these photos and replaced Loree's arms with fat arms, but it made no difference. Loree just plastered more fakes online of her and Brent together. By this time, Loree had stolen all of Brent's credit cards and had pretty much spent up all his money. Brent was trying to lock up his money into accounts that Loree could not touch at this time. Loree was used to her reputation as a celebrity wife, and his fans commented on how she seemed more enamored with her celebrity lifestyle and being the girlfriend of a famous man than with Brent himself. 2001 to 2006, artificial insemination to trap Brent into marriage. In Florida, Gail, newly divorced and with no job, could not afford a computer, and her mother and stepdad, whom she lived with, did not have a computer until 2004. After 9/11/2001, Gail became discouraged that she would ever be able to marry Brent, and knowing her home was bugged because of Brent and his friends who were looking out for her, she spoke to the bugs and told the world how to respond to the 9/11/2001 attacks. At this time, Vladimir Putin noticed her and got Gail's attention through his photo in the Florida newspaper, and Gail decided she wanted to marry Vladimir Putin. She said to the bugs in her room, "I'm going to marry the Russian president." Brent was devastated, but liked and respected Vladimir Putin, and thought perhaps Vladimir would have better luck than he did, but then Ludmila happened. The Jesuits forced Vladimir to marry a clone of his dead wife Larissa in November 2001, getting cooperation from President George W. Bush. Loree, knowing Gail was distracted with Vladimir Putin, went for the kill. Jesuits instructed her to artificially impregnate herself with semen they had stolen from Brent in September 1992. And Loree gave birth to Jackson Spiner in June 2002. She used this as a weapon to solidify to the world that she was the real love interest of Brent Spiner and that Gail is a crazy lady that Brent could care less about. Actually, her pregnancy with Jackson mortified Brent because it would just entrench Loree deeper into his life, and he already felt like her slave. However, though Loree did have this child, she was not living with Brent at this time. And even though Gail was trying to marry Vladimir Putin, she kept Brent as a friend and even helped him in court cases he had against her in 2002 by submitting statements to help him in court. Gail did not know about Loree's pregnancy because Gail did not have a computer or internet at this time. If Gail had known, she may have reinstated Brent as her main love interest, knowing how this would distress Brent. Gail just thought that Vladimir had more guts than Brent at this time, and gave up that Brent would ever find the guts to bug Loree and come to her. Gail knew Brent was intimidated, and who wouldn't be after what Jesuits did September 11, 2001? After Jackson was born, Vladimir Putin made an arrangement with Brent to adopt a boy who was born in Russia and had the genes of Gail and Brent, apparently also conceived through artificial insemination. Brent adopted this boy and called him Jackson, and raised him quietly to pacify Loree so that Loree would not attack Gail. By having a child with Gail's genes, it made Brent feel he was with Gail in a way, and he pacified Loree at the same time. So Brent played Loree's game to keep Loree from attacking Gail. The Jesuits were not happy that once Brent came into Gail's life, Gail seemed to be attracting the attention of all his rich and famous friends. This boy has apparently been placed with a good family. Loree has found the real Jackson, and starting in 2017, has promoted him publicly as her and Brent's son to solidify her lies to the world that she has been the real Brent Spiner's love interest. Brent Spiner went to medical school at UCLA to help out Gail with all her medical problems at this time, and often gave Gail advice brain to brain about medical conditions Jesuits gave her. He graduated from UCLA Med School in 2006. 2006 to 2011, propagandist, liar, and controller. However, when Vladimir had not married Gail by 2006 because the U.S. threatened war on Russia if he did so, Gail reinstated Brent as her main lover in February 2006. Brent was working on Threshold from September 2005 to February 2006 at this time, and lost his job immediately once Gail reinstated Brent. Brent, excited by Gail's rekindled desire to marry him, made his music album Dreamland for Gail, with a storyline about a woman who gave up on her lover and then reinstated him. But Loree threatened to kill Gail if he would not mention Loree and Jackson on the album. So Brent mentioned Loree in very small print among a group of names on the back of the album. Vladimir had introduced Gail to brain loving in spring 2003, and Gail's main method of communicating with Brent from 2006 to 2011 was brain-to-brain communication, using mind-reading technology where just thinking a thought would be relayed to the other via satellite. In 2011, Gail got the internet and learned about Jackson, and that Loree claimed that Jackson was conceived via natural sex with Brent Spiner. Gail was mortified for Brent and started making videos to let the world know the truth. Brent, upon seeing Gail in videos, couldn't take it and had to contact her and created a YouTube channel to communicate with her. Gail realized this was the real Brent, and they had a communication via YouTube from June 2011 to September 15, 2011. The Jesuits wasted no time when Brent started writing Gail, and Loree started stalking Brent again and broke into his Malibu house and knocked him over the head, playing that she and Brent just had wild sex together while she stroked his head in the hospital. Loree threatened to kill Gail and tried to intimidate Gail into backing off with her communications with Brent. But Gail would not allow Loree to cause her to betray Brent. Gail took Loree to court. Jesuits used their cloning technology to the max and used a Brent Spiner clone who switched out with Brent during the trial to force Brent against his will to have sex with Loree in the court bathroom by doing a partial switch out where most of the real Brent went into fourth and higher dimensions, where most of Brent's body became the clone and the penis was Brent's with Brent's penis inside Loree's mouth. She bit off most of his penis during the court sex so that when he returned to his place in the audience, his long penis was dangling like on a string, while Loree was on the court stand laughing, saying she now had proof that she and Brent were married. This was used as evidence that he and Loree had a real relationship. The Jesuits then switched out all the thousands of jurors with Jesuit clones, and they pronounced the death penalty on Gail and planned to fly out in their jet and personally execute Gail. They claimed Gail deserved the death penalty because she and Vladimir nuked an underwater city that was a laboratory to create a Jesuit clone army. Loree would tell Gail that the babies were all hers and Brent's, and that's why Gail murdered them and deserved the death penalty. Judge Terrance Jenkins pulled out his gun and shot dead the head Jesuit juror. Then Brent Spiner, Vladimir Putin, Hugh Jackman, and most of Gail's men in the audience for the trial shot dead all the Jesuits in that courtroom. They saved Gail's life. Terrance Jenkins asked Loree what she thought about this, and Loree said, "This is horrible. I can't believe that Vladimir Putin is getting an erection." Judge Terrance decided that Loree was the one who needed to be executed. Actually, during the trial, Loree clone number 3 was killed by a scanner that determined she was getting ready to bomb the courtroom. Loree clone number 4 set fire to the courtroom and killed some people, and so they had to shoot her dead during the trial. Then a Jesuit lawyer came to the stand and said the trial should go on because they had a blip and it was nothing, and that Loree clone number 5 could continue the trial. At the trial's conclusion, Gail's men personally executed the remaining Loree clones who were all in cages. In the middle of the executions, the cage doors opened, and one of the Lorees grabbed Brent by the arm, and Brent and the Lorees vanished. They'd been rescued by a UFO. Gail was able to communicate with Brent brain to brain and learned he was on a UFO. The UFO mechanic aliens healed Brent's penis, enabling Brent to do brain-to-brain loving while on the UFO. Gail prayed to Jesus to rescue Brent, knowing UFOs are the fallen angels. And while she and Brent were making love brain to brain, the UFO dropped Brent off in the Egyptian desert. In the meanwhile, they took the Loree clones and Brent heard them screaming in the background right before he got dropped off in the desert. Gail wrote to Rance Jenkins and told him where Brent was, and they rescued a hungry and thirsty Brent in the Egyptian desert. Gail told Brent that the UFOs are the fallen angels and that she believed Jesus scared off that UFO so that they dropped him off in the desert. Gail was able to lead Brent to Jesus because Gail told Brent that if he accepted Christ, the UFOs would not be able to abduct him ever again. Brent then led all of Gail's men to Jesus, and they started a Church of Gail for Gail. However, on Gail's birthday, September 15, 2011, a Brent Spiner clone claimed that the real Brent who wrote Gail via YouTube was impersonating Brent Spiner and convinced YouTube to shut down Brent's YouTube channel for Gail. At this time, the Brent Spiner clone was stalking Brent and trying to kill him. They had a meeting in the parking lot of Brent's Malibu home, and just as the clone was about to stab Brent, Hugh Jackman appeared and rescued Brent and shot the clone dead. Unfortunately, Jesuits have created other Brent Spiner clones after this one. Gail and her men are uncertain what happened to the Loree McBride clones who were on the UFO. But Loree had hundreds of clones, and executing her does not get rid of her because she is a prototype. And as long as there's a Jesuit cloning lab, Loree reappears. Pretty much the same thing happens with the Brent Spiner clone. 2011 to 2016, Loree McBride inside Zach Knight's Jesuit empire strikes. Brent was able to continue his communications with Gail via email from 2011 to now. Though around 2014 and onwards, Brent lost control over his Twitter. In fact, when Brent tried to create a Twitter account to communicate with Gail online, the Brent Spiner clone, who had control over Brent's official Twitter, managed to shut down Brent's Twitter for impersonation because Gail wished Brent a happy birthday on February 2nd, 2018, even though Brent called his Twitter Brent Spiner MD. Because Jesuits probably invented the internet, they have plastered websites that portray Gail as a crazy paranoid schizophrenic while attempting to make Loree appear Brent's true love interest, and that Gail is just a crazy paranoid schizophrenic and not the object of Brent's 2 music albums. Loree forced Brent to take both albums using death threats on Gail, especially the first one, Oh Yellow Eyes Is Back, off the market. Because when people listen to the music, it's obvious Loree was not the person he made those albums for. Loree's goal, since Brent started communicating with Gail online, has been to totally destroy their communication and make it impossible for Brent to be with Gail safely. She also blocks his attempts to help Gail out financially. Brent has learned that the only way he can be safe from Loree is to live on Church of Gail, a spaceship city that first Vladimir Putin and his scientists created for Gail and her men to live safe from Jesuit harassment and crimes against them. 2016 to 2018, Jesuit empire splits, gets new leadership, Angelina Ballerina, then Loree McBride. In August 2016, Gail, as a result of obeying the Gail commandments, which Jesus gave her through Brent Spiner, developed a Gail shield that protected her and Earth from Jesuit Nukaki bombs, nuclear bombs that have semen in them and can literally drown out the entire planet or nations. A Jesuit super Nukaki was launched towards Earth with the goal to demolish once and for all the powerful Gail shield because the Gail shield was killing off Jesuits. When the super Nukaki hit the shield, it ricocheted off of it and went back to its origination point where the Jesuit space fleet along with the UFOs were out in very deep space. It drowned out the entire Jesuit space fleet along with all the UFOs, creating a semen ocean right where Satan's ocean is, as described in Job. That's the Bible. All the UFOs became encased in inescapable semen bubbles. All the Jesuits died. Antichrist and Jesuit leader Zach Knight, who could not die because he was the Antichrist, did CPR on Rule 13 and resuscitated her. But right as he did, he got swept away by a semen wave and got stuck inside a semen bubble. Rule 13 saw Angelina Ballerina and rescued her and brought her into her space pod to try and rescue Zach Knight out of his semen bubble before he became so encased they would not be able to rescue him. Angelina then said, "This is what I've waited for all my life." She hit Rule 13 over the head with a fry pan and knocked her out, and then entered Zach's semen bubble, probably by transporter technology, and claimed that Rule 13 had died and that she needed Zach's Antichrist powers to come back and rescue him. Angelina said she loved Zach and would come back to get him. Rule 13 was inside a space pod, and due to the force of gravity, even though Angelina tried to kick Rule 13 into the semen ocean, Rule 13 ricocheted off of it, and her space pod was flung out into space with an unconscious Rule 13 inside. About a couple days later, the Church of Gail's spaceship saw the space pod heading towards them and thought it was a missile, but realized that it was a space pod and somebody was inside. They brought Rule 13 on board, and Rule 13 told them what happened to her and how Angelina had betrayed Zach Knight. Angelina boasted that she would marry all the men on Gail's marriage list and said she was so hot and had such strong seductive powers that if any man came near her, they would have an uncontrollable desire to have sex with her. She approached Gail's men at Church of Gail and broke through the Gail shield and was on her way to Gail's apartment to rape Gail and all her men. Angelina was walking through Gail's town, and all the men who saw her climbed over each other and had erections so hard some penises exploded and some men died, while they were all clamoring to go to jewelry stores and buy her wedding rings. Gail's men were also affected, and Angelina managed to take Gerard Butler and Matthew McConaughey as her hostages. They were all having sex with her in an uncontrollable rage. Gail instructed her men to fly away from Angelina at once because all of them were falling under her brain control. In the meanwhile, Gail contacted Zach Knight brain to brain and told him that Rule 13 was alive and Angelina had betrayed him. Zach was so upset he threw up. Gail then said that Satan had also betrayed Zach and led Zach to Jesus. Zach loved Rule 13 so much when he thought she was dead, he no longer wanted to be Antichrist. Gail's men were able to get the semen bubble that Zach was in and put it aboard Church of Gail. It was very risky and almost life-threatening, but after using an anti-semen missile that exploded his semen bubble, Zach escaped his semen bubble with injuries and quickly healed, and Zach and Rule 13 have come to Gail and Jesus' side. In the middle of September 2016, Angelina was able to resurrect all the Jesuits who died in the August 2016 space battle from the ricocheted Super Nukaki. This included Loree McBride. They all lived on Angelina's new pink spacecraft, which was actually larger than Church of Gail, which was the size of a large city. Angelina went on rape fests using her brain control powers and made men go crazy while killing them with super erections that caused their penises to explode. She created bombs that left a pink afterglow in the sky and were loaded with germs that made people sick, especially yeast germs, using engineered yeast germs that defy conventional treatments. These bombs also killed people. Because Angelina lost Zach Knight, she kept Jesuits loyal to her by downgrading Zach Knight as not evil enough to be the Antichrist and as a failure. Angelina boasted about how hot she was and that no man could resist her, and due to her brain control powers, this was true. But once the man got off of her brain control, they were thoroughly disgusted with how their body was used against their will to have sex with this cold woman. To justify her goal to take over the world for Satan, Angelina created a political climate that emphasized the women's rights movement and downgraded masculinity in men because she knew she lost Rule 13 and Zach to Gail because Gail and Rule 13 admired Zach Knight's masculinity. Angelina knew that masculine men would never desire her because of her treachery, and so she demonized them. At this time, Donald Trump was siding with Gail, and Hillary Clinton, who used to side with Gail, became BFF with evil Angelina Ballerina. Angelina was dropping bombs worldwide, killing and sickening people, and Gail and her men could not stop her because if they got near her, her strong brain control would make the men want to make love to her so bad they'd quit trying to kill her and would go in a rage trying to make love to her. Also, with her Antichrist powers, she could not be killed. Gail told her men to design a powerful Sarakaki with the power to knock out the entire universe, but would encase Angelina in a semen bubble so thick it would extend to half the universe. But after a Donald Trump rally, November 4th, 2016, that Angelina took over where she showed Donald her breasts, he fell under her brain control. Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin were with her. Hillary took out a dildo and removed her clothing, exposing a hive underneath her clothes that kept her alive. She laughed wickedly and forced a dildo into Trump's rear, causing bleeding and anal fissures. She said by the time she was through with Trump, she would win the election for sure. The whole crowd was under Angelina's brain control, all chanting that Trump was winning while Hillary was dildo raping him. Vladimir Putin in the audience became so enraged at the sight that he launched a nuke on the entire rally. But Angelina at the last minute saved everybody and transported them secretly to her pink spaceship. She also kidnapped Rule 13 from Church of Gail at this time. When the U.S. presidential elections happened on November 8, 2016, Gail told the world that if they voted for Donald Trump, they were actually voting for her. Gail won the presidential election for Donald Trump. Vladimir was so traumatized by what happened, all he would do until Gail and Zach defeated Angelina was to cry and drink vodka. Gail, Brent Spiner, Vladimir Putin, and Zach Knight lost everybody on Church of Gail and were unable to finish the Sarakaki. Because Angelina had everybody at Church of Gail, she now knew of the Sarakaki and made plans to kidnap it. Gail and her men tried to build the bomb, but everybody they tried to enlist to help them got seduced by Angelina and never made it to Church of Gail, except for a bunch of retards, Angelina's joke on Gail and her men. Gail and her men thought everyone died, and that's why Vladimir was basically useless from November 4, 2016, until Gail and Zach defeated Angelina on January 6, 2017. Angelina created an army of clones and used them as a shield to allow her to get to Church of Gail, in spite of Gail's lightning bolts on the Antichrist Angelina. These clones, thousands of them, all died to make way for Angelina to get to Church of Gail. Once she got to Church of Gail, Brent Spiner and Vladimir Putin fell under her powerful brain control, and she kidnapped them onto her pink spacecraft. When Brent came to on the pink spacecraft, Loree McBride was on top of him, and he learned Angelina had stolen the powerful Sarakaki and transformed it into a bomb that had the power to knock out the universe 3 times over. She threatened to launch it onto Florida, where Gail lived, if Brent would not make love to Loree with more passion than he ever did for Gail. She would determine the amount of passion by measuring the length of his erection while he made love to Loree and reading his mind and emotions to determine if his feelings were genuine. If he failed, she would launch the Sarakaki onto Gail. So Brent used method acting and passed Angelina's test and impregnated Loree McBride, who was ecstatic over this. Brent Spiner then threw up. Angelina then laughed and said she would now launch the Sarakaki anyways and said, "You should know better than to trust a Jesuit." And she hit the button to launch the Sarakaki. It would take 2 days before it would reach Earth because Angelina's pink spacecraft was in deep space. Loree then said that Gail was Brent's ex and she had taken Gail's place. Brent protested and said, "Never!" Then the Jesuits had a contest to see which of Brent's sperm would impregnate Loree's egg. When that happened, they used their UFO technology to grow the zygote into a baby in minutes. Loree gave birth to a baby girl, and then Rule 13 showed up and whisked it away, breastfeeding it with her perfect tiny breasts. Angelina and Loree chased after Rule 13, giving Brent some space, where he whisked out his iPad and wrote Gail an email about the events that just transpired and warning her and Earth about the approaching Sarakaki. Zach and Gail were communicating at this time, and Gail encouraged Zach and said that Jesus would not fail them. She was willing to risk her life and be beamed aboard Church of Gail using the power of her Gail shield to block the oncoming Sarakaki. The Sarakaki was headed straight for Florida, and Gail and Zach flew the Church of Gail spacecraft into the Sarakaki to block it from hitting Earth. The powerful Sarakaki totally drained the powerful Gail shield and the Church of Gail shield. Zach separated Gail from Church of Gail, saying he needed to save her. Now he faced Angelina's pink spacecraft all alone without any shields on Church of Gail. But Zach and Gail had saved Earth from the Sarakaki. It had completely been absorbed by the combined Gail shield, Church of Gail shield. Right as Angelina was about to shoot missiles at Church of Gail and kill Zach Knight, Rule 13 aboard Angelina's pink spacecraft blew up bombs all over Angelina's spacecraft, causing Angelina's spacecraft to lose its shields. Zach was now able to beam all of Angelina's captives, that included Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Brent Spiner, and all those kidnapped from the Trump rally, onto Church of Gail. Zach launched a missile on Angelina's pink spacecraft with her shields down, and it plummeted to the Earth below. But Angelina had one missile left, and she launched it. Both spacecrafts were in a spiral downwards to Earth. The pink spacecraft crashed first, followed by Church of Gail. Church of Gail's inertial dampeners came on at the last minute, and nobody died on the crash on Church of Gail. But everybody died on Angelina's spacecraft, except for Angelina and Rule 13 and the newborn baby still suckling on Rule 13's breast. Angelina had a gun to Rule 13's head and demanded Zach Knight face her. Just then, Zach's penis started glowing like the sun, and all the Jesuits bowed down to worship his penis. Angelina, too, fell under the spell of his penis and dropped the gun she had to Rule 13's head and crawled on her hands and knees to Zach Knight to kiss the tip of his penis. When she did so, a shot of semen came out and burst through her head, killing her. Angelina died and went to hell. All the Jesuits there who saw Zach's glowing penis came to Jesus and Gail's side. The little baby has been adopted by a family on Earth. The Jesuits left on Earth who did not see Zach's glowing penis, some of them would become the Loree McBride Jesuits. Loree McBride on Earth decided that she did not want to belong to the Zach Knight Jesuits. She enjoyed her celebrity lifestyle and feared she would have to give that up if she came to Jesus' side. So she organized a group of rogue Jesuits who, like her, were enamored with their easy life of fame and money and did not want to give it up. Loree enjoyed being evil and having everybody believe she was a Hollywood celebrity wife, and was not willing to give that up and let Brent marry the woman he's wanted since 1990, Gail Chord Schuler. In May 2017, Loree used evil Jews in Israel and her evil Brent Spiner Jew clone husband to create an army of Jew clones who had very large noses and were so greedy that they would orchestrate terrorist horrors that they would then blame on their enemies, while they created frivolous lawsuits with which to take the monies and reputation of their enemies. Loree capitalized on the evil Jesuit framework already in place, with the internet full of Jesuit lies and the mainstream media all fake news, and used that to propel her to power as the new Antichrist and Jesuit leader in place of evil Angelina Ballerina. She continued the narrative that evil Angelina has established, that macho men needed to be eliminated and replaced with evil beta males who would allow evil women like Angelina and Loree to rule over them. Now that Loree was the new Jesuit head, she gloated in her power and continued the horrors of Angelina Ballerina, except that Loree did not have Angelina's brain control powers. Loree's specialty has always been in the courts, and she has used Jew clone lawyers to go after Gail's men and Donald Trump to blame them for the terrorist incidents she orchestrated in order to take them down using the courts and corrupt politicians who side with her. Having evil Hillary Clinton on her side, Loree has become a hard left Democrat and has used her Antichrist powers to hijack the Democratic Party and has a large youth following because people of depth and maturity don't follow her. Her Jew clone, Cuckosaurus Rex husband, the Brent Spiner clone, does her bidding. The evil Brent Spiner clone has totally taken over the real Brent's Twitter, so that Brent has no access to his Twitter. In fact, Brent can't even make a separate account under the name Brent Spiner MD without being taken down by this evil Brent Spiner clone for impersonation. Loree has taken over MSNBC, CNN, and most of the mainstream news, and is currently trying to take the First and Second Amendment rights of Americans as she plans a takeover with her as the shadow leader of the world. She's totally evil, so she cannot allow intelligent people who would oppose her to have free speech and the ability to defend themselves against her regime with weapons. She has created an army of clones which she plans to use to replace the people who would oppose her. It appears that if Loree can't get the real Brent to willingly and knowingly be her partner, that she will just destroy him and Gail and all Gail's supporters. She seems content to have the Brent Spiner clone as her husband, but she's not content to give up her celebrity lifestyle and reputation as Brent Spiner's wife. So she won't allow Brent to marry Gail and goes all out to make sure this doesn't happen. Loree has instructed the Brent Spiner clone to ensure that he totally takes over the real Brent's identity. Brent has basically lost all his celebrity income and lives a humble life serving Jesus and Gail aboard Church of Gail, and is even now studying for the ministry at Dallas Theological Seminary. Even though Brent and Gail don't care about living a celebrity lifestyle, Loree does, and she's not prepared to give this up by allowing Brent and Gail to marry. She's trying to bring down Donald Trump because he supports Gail and her laws. Gail is currently trying to take down Loree, but this is not an easy task because she has Antichrist powers, and when we execute her, another Loree pops up in her place with Antichrist powers. The Antichrist cannot be killed. Loree, knowing only evil people will follow her and not having enough evil people to do her bidding, has created her following in cloning labs and raised up an army of evil clones who will allow her to lead the Loree McBride clone Jesuits. Clones have fallen angel DNA and often have superhuman strength. They tend to be evil. Clone women like Loree often have the strength of a man, enabling them to easily rape a man. Loree is the shadow producer of Star Trek Discovery, relying heavily on her Jew clones to be producers and writers for the show. She controls the publicity for the show, which is actually a ratings flop, and is trying to revamp Hollywood to promote women's rights and make alpha males appear evil because they don't support her. To make up for poor ratings for any of her productions and her control over fake news, she instructs all her followers to watch all shows she promotes to create the impression that she represents the majority. If she's not the majority, she'll make herself the majority by creating more evil clones to replace the real persons who oppose her. However, she's not worried about the bad ratings because she's currently on a campaign to remove all the people who don't like her and her version of the world and replace them with their evil clones. Those who would dare criticize her and her superiority will just be taken down. This is how she solves the problem of not being popular with people who have morals and appreciate life's true values. Her Jew clone lawyers have become expert at moralizing their way out of their crimes, making their victims appear evil, something Loree does very well. She's done this to the real Brent Spiner, who can't even manage his own Twitter, and Gail Schuler, who deeply loves Brent Spiner and could care less about fame and would never steal money from innocents like Loree does to maintain a rich and famous lifestyle. Loree, probably remembering how guns stopped her in the 2011 Quebec trial, is on a rage to take away the Second Amendment rights from those who would oppose her as the shadow leader of the U.S. Loree needs to take over the U.S. to take over the world, and that's her goal. She knows that if she can't reign as shadow world leader, that she'll have to give up her rich and famous lifestyle, which she thinks she deserves merely because of her superiority to everybody else who won't worship her as the gorgeous hot celebrity. Even though Brent has never wanted her, she has his clone. So all she has to do is get rid of Brent and Gail. She can't do this without a world reign because Brent and Gail are trying to stop this evil woman and her horrors. Loree McBride could win the Nobel Prize for murder. In her attempts to gain world control, she's dropped so many bombs with a pink glow to honor Angelina Ballerina, set so many fires, stolen so much money, launched so many terrorist attacks, she's literally murdered billions. Her goal is to replace all the righteous, those who love Jesus and who would oppose her, with their evil clones. She's created so many clones they could almost fill the entire earth. It appears that all of Hollywood who would oppose her, the real LeVar Burton, the real Steven Spielberg, etc., have been replaced with clones. It's possible that the real persons now have to live on Church of Gail to be safe from Loree McBride. The Brent Spiner clone has been flooding the internet with his photos under Loree's leadership in an attempt to totally take over the identity of the Brent who played Data in Star Trek The Next Generation, and to discredit Brent's true love, Gail Chord Schuler. He has no talent, and Loree McBride has to support him with her criminal activities and money laundering. This may explain why he's her cuck. Jew clones are greedy. Under Loree McBride's Jesuit leadership, Jackson Spiner, her son, has been featured in photos with the Brent Spiner clone to solidify her as the legit wife of Brent Spiner. The real Brent always tried to protect the privacy of the boy who lived with him, 2002 to 2014, who desired anonymity. Loree wants to put her artificial insemination son out there front and center to make Gail seem crazy and that she and Brent had a regular sexual relationship without drug rape and extortion. Jackson has been featured in photos online in women's marches which his terrorist mother Loree and Loree's BFF George Soros organized, trying to oust Donald Trump. Most of the kids marching for gun control laws are her clones. She created them specifically in cloning labs to be the marchers to pave a road for her path to worldwide control, even orchestrating the terrorist incidents needed to give her spokespersons instant celebrity, giving her narrative the attention she needs to set up conditions for a world takeover. She's using them to try and take down Trump and Gail so that she can reign as the drug rapist celebrity wife she yearns to be, with no hindrances to her life of crime, wealth, rape of rich men, and luxury, which she feels she deserves because she feels with her superiority in looks and her celebrity status handed to her on a silver platter that she is destined to be this way forever, and that all who oppose her deserve to die and be extinguished. She's prepared to take over the world if that's what she must do, to be the leader of a worldwide crime syndicate to oust those, Donald Trump, Gail Chord Schuler, Zach Knight, the real Brent Spiner, etc., who won't let her continue her abuse of innocence, her rapes of rich men, her lies to make herself the hottest woman alive, and all else that feeds her certainty that her superiority in everything must be acknowledged, and that those who don't acknowledge her superiority, who want to deny her the reign she deserves, are trash that she's entitled to do anything to that she likes. She thinks she's so superior that everyone should be her slave. Those who like being her slaves are her cucks. She rewards her slaves, like her greedy Brent Spiner clone, Cuckosaurus Rex husband, with money and violent sex. Those who object to this arrangement deserve no freedom and must have all their rights taken from them and deserve to die. Satan meets with her often and advises her.